Never stop reading the Bible. Today, we're unpacking chapters 23 through 25, and it's a raw, unflinching look at sin, judgment, and ultimately, divine justice. So, you might be wondering, what can a prophecy from thousands of years ago really tell us today? It's a great question. Well, what we see in these chapters of Ezekiel is this fundamental pattern of actions and their inevitable consequences. A pattern that you'll see echoes throughout history, even to our own time. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at a pretty shocking parable about two sisters that gets into the real depth of sin. Then, we'll see how judgment is shown as a sure thing, using the symbol of a boiling pot. And finally, we'll see how this whole proclamation of justice expands way beyond Israel to the nations all around them.
Okay, let's get into chapter 23. To really drive his point home, the prophet Ezekiel uses this incredibly vivid and, frankly, scandalous story about two sisters. And it's designed to be shocking. It's meant to show just how far God's people had strayed.
So who are these sisters in this parable? Well, the older one, Aholah, she represents Samaria, which was the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. And the younger sister, Oholiba, represents Jerusalem, the capital of the southern kingdom of Judah. Now, their sin wasn't just some small mistake. The text describes it as a deep, deep betrayal, a kind of spiritual adultery. They turned away from God to worship idols, and they started trusting in shaky political alliances with other nations instead of in their faith. But here's the real kicker. Oholiba, Jerusalem, watched her sister Aholah get destroyed for doing these exact same things, and what did she do? She dove in and sinned even worse. So, after laying out the sin in such graphic detail, the prophecy shifts gears. The next metaphor is just as vivid, but this time, it's all about the judgment that has to follow. We're moving from the story of betrayal to the absolute certainty of its consequences. And that metaphor is a boiling pot. You gotta picture this. The pot itself represents Jerusalem. The fire roaring underneath, that's the invading Babylonian army. And everything inside the pot, all the people in their corruption, is about to be consumed by this fierce, purifying judgment. The message here is pretty clear. There is no escaping the heat. The prophecy lays out this process that's just inescapable. It's 3 steps. First, all the corruption that was kind of hidden is brought out into the open for everyone to see. Second, because of that, judgment is officially declared. And third, the destruction that comes next is total. This isn't just chaos, it's presented as the direct, methodical result of the choices they made.
But believe it or not, the story doesn't just end with Jerusalem. In chapter 25, the camera kind of zooms out. Ezekiel's message suddenly gets bigger, expanding beyond Israel and Judah to deal with what the neighboring nations were doing.
And now, that judgment spreads to the neighbors. You've got Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia. They're all held accountable. But get this, it's not for idolatry. It's for how they treated God's people when they were suffering. They mocked them, they were vengeful, they showed contempt. And the point here is huge. Divine justice isn't just for some in-group. In this prophecy, it applies to everybody. So after that intense journey, what are the big takeaways? Well, first, spiritual unfaithfulness is treated as a really serious betrayal. Second, consequences for our actions aren't just a maybe, they're an absolute certainty. And finally, the standard of justice is universal. It applies to all nations, not just a chosen few. It is definitely some heavy stuff, but it leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. When you see this ancient story of cause and effect play out on such a huge scale, what does it make you think about? Accountability and consequences, not just for nations back then, but for us, in our own lives and our own communities, right now.
This has been a production of The Center Studio.